there is the item restriction for the S Corp. That's what the law actually says. If you want to have an S corporation, in order to qualify as an S corporation, you cannot have a non-resident alien. Non-resident alien is defined, and you're going to see that, in a subsequent presentation. A non-resident is an individual that does not qualify as a resident. So who is a resident? Someone that has a green card, right? That's one. And another one, that's the relevant one for everyone. If someone is physically present in the United States for more than 183 days over a period of 3 years, that is called the substantial presence test. If you are physically present in the U.S., no matter your immigration status, from a tax perspective, you are what? A resident. Does that make sense for everyone? And if you're a resident, do you qualify to be a shareholder in an S corporation? Yes or no?
Yes.
So, end of discussion, right? So all the IT holders can have an S corporation, yes or no?
Yes.
Are we going to recommend that to them? Huh? Yes or no?
Yes.
I yes. No, it's like, yes is like a little bit weak in there. What is the problem in reality of having an IT holder being a shareholder of an S corporation? Payroll, right? Who has problem running payroll with ITs? No one, because no one does this. No one. Okay, we're going to see that. Okay? So, the manual even of the IRS recognizes, Internal Revenue Manual recognizes that IT holders are eligible to be a shareholder of a subchapter S corporation. So I don't need to be inventing anything. That's the IRS words. So the conclusion is, a person that meets the substantial presence test can actually be a shareholder of an S corporation. That is settled. Now the problem is that payroll. The problem is under the Federal Insurance Contributions Act. What is that? The FICA, right? It defines that an employee, you are considered an employee if you are an officer of that corporation. In the majority of the cases, the IT holder is what? A manager of that entity that is an S corporation. So what's the problem there? That is going to be treated as what? As an employee. And if it's treated as an employee, we need to pay what? Huh? Payroll. In an S corporation, we need to make sure that that compensation is what? Reasonable. Reasonable compensation. Do we agree on that? Yes. Excellent. Now, that is the problem. From an immigration perspective, we also have that other issue, the I-9. Because we need to comply and we need to verify the status. What I'm going to tell you, and I'm not an immigration attorney, but there is, and you can find it online. If you are an officer, you are an employee, technically speaking, right? I need to verify my own status for working in the U.S. Now, there is this agency within the Department of Justice that is called the Office of the Chief Administrative Hearing Officer, the OCAHO, right? That court, administrative court, has jurisdiction to resolve immigration issues concerning employment based in the U.S. Okay? So, these are the guys that actually tell us and interpret who needs to be, or who is legally authorized. Well, not legally authorized, but who resolves the controversies about who needs to file an I-9. So, in this case, and you're going to remember this all in your life, because as peculiar as it sounds, you're never going to forget this. The name of the case of that president is Speedy Gonzalez. I don't want to imagine why. But in the case of U.S. versus Speedy Gonzalez Construction, back in 2014, the government said that as a general rule, the OCAHO case law has recognized, listen to this, that an individual from an immigration perspective is not an employee, right, of an enterprise if that individual has an ownership interest or control over or part of the business itself. What does that mean for an IT holder that is the owner of its own business, which is the majority of the cases? Is he going to be treated, he or she is going to be treated as an employee?
No.
No, under this case law. Does that make sense for everyone?
Yes.
Now, it's not as clear as water because, of course, there's a couple of factors in there that you can omit. Based on this precedent, what they say is you need to look at all the facts and the circumstances. And based on these facts and circumstances, if, for example, the worker, right, is subject to minimum supervision, that individual will be considered more an owner rather than an employee. Therefore, I don't need to provide the I-9 for that individual. For example, an IT holder is the owner in a construction business. He is the big fella in there. I'm sorry that I'm talking about a guy, but in construction generally is, a man, right? But of course could be an empowered woman as well. So, well, let's do the example with an empowered woman, okay? So the empowered woman, right? She is the owner of that construction business. They called La Doña. Because she's like, psh, no work. Okay? So La Doña, she holds an IT number. But there's no one else above her. Does she have to report to someone else above her? I mean, she is La Doña. No one exercises supervision over La Doña. Please. Does that make sense? So, under the first factor, La Doña will be treated as what? As an employee or as an owner?
Owner.
If she's treated as an owner, technically speaking, she doesn't need to provide the I-9. Okay? So, these are ways, alternatives that we can find in order to mitigate the risk. I'm not saying that this is 100% bulletproof, but if something were to happen to some IT holder in a business, right, you have this defense in order to protect yourself. Now, there are several factors in there. For example, you do not report to a supervisor. La Doña doesn't report to nobody. Of course, this is like a telenovela. La Doña, empower here, empower there. She doesn't follow no one's instructions. Third factor, La Doña can influence the business, general operations, and strategic direction. Yes, of course, she's La Doña. She's the one that says what needs to be done and what doesn't needs to be done. Other individuals involved in the business consider La Doña to be an owner rather than an employee. I mean, honestly, if I were to work with La Doña, I would be scared. Like you're in the construction site and then La Doña is coming. Ooh. Córrele, papa. Man, leave the coquita in there like I am working. Does that make sense for everyone over there? So in all of these cases, if you meet these series of factors, which an IT holder generally in their own businesses, they meet those requirements. From an immigration perspective, it doesn't seem, to be violating that federal law. Does that make sense for everyone?
Yes.
So you like this or no?
Yes.
There you go.
Thank
La
you.
Doña shares in the profits and losses of the business, of course. It's her money for all purposes. It's her business. So, the owner is not an employee even if that individual gets paid reasonable compensation to meet the requirements of an S corporation. So we see now that you can be, technically speaking, a shareholder in an S corporation, right? From the other perspective, the immigration perspective, we have a way to reduce the exposure, right? So then that's what is the problem with having an S corporation with an IT holder? The problem, I'm going to go back, is that I need to receive payroll again. And a person with an IT gets a W-2. Can that individual get a W-2? Yes or no?
No.
Yes or no? Yes, no? Remember at the very beginning you told me that there was no restriction with an IT holder doing business in the US? Then why are you saying no? Do we really have a restriction, yes or no? A W-2 can go with an ID number?
No.
I mean, I know all the techniques, to be honest. Not because I had applied them, rest assured. Because I have been informed as to those techniques, okay? So, I know that some of obscure techniques that you use in that, W-2 in order to run payroll, and that honestly creates issue for you guys. Because you're the ones that are preparing those forms. And remember that whatever you put in those papers is going to send to who? To the government. So, you're making certain statements to them. That's risky. So what can we do if we cannot run payroll? And I don't even want to talk about the states. Because there are some states that are horrible to the business, right? They require a specific verification. The verification of via the system that the government has, right? For example, in Texas, we do not have it up to a certain amount of employees. But in other ones, like Florida, it's a little bit harsher. California is a little bit, relaxed. So we have problems at the state level as well. What can we do in order to simplify all of these matters? Well, we can do the following. Rather than trying to fit an IT holder within an S corporation, we can use the partnership as an alternative. It is clean and it saves a lot of the issues, specifically running payroll with an S corporation for an IT holder. How many of you have prepared a partnership return here? Very few. So for the other ones, you need to learn how. Because this is relevant, specifically given certain precedent that is applicable in these days. What's going on here? The main benefit of the S corporation, and we want to fit it within the S corporation, is because we reduce the contribution to Social Security, right? Let's assume that someone, La Doña, right, receives 50% as reasonable compensation and the other 50% as distribution. On what amount she's going to pay Social Security taxes? On which amount of those two? The reasonable compensation or the distribution side?
The reasonable.
The distribution.
Reasonable.
On the reasonable compensation. Remember, in an S corporation, you are subject to Social Security taxes. You are an employee. Your employer pays half of it. You pay the other part of it. But on the distribution side, half of what the La Doña receives from the construction company is not subject to self-employment. And that's a big saving of an S corporation. How can we achieve the same treatment within a partnership? Look, this is where it goes. So a partnership is an agreement between two individuals. There are different types of partnerships. I don't have enough time to talk about all the partnership side. But what can I tell you is that if I agree with you guys, in order to open a business, yesterday I was putting an example. How many of you have gone to, I'm going to make a big announcement, to Taqueria El Gordo? How many of you? Huh? You went yesterday, today? No? You like it or not? Well, I'm going to do better. I'm going to open Taqueria El Flaco. You go to my place, you don't get fat. Yeah, of course. You don't increase your weight, My tacos have a certain recipe, provoke certain, release. Anyways. And this with some of you. We just enter into a verbal agreement. Hey, let's split 50-50, and that's it. That creates a partnership automatically. We need to file Form 1065. Okay? Now, the problem with that partnership is that because everyone is sharing into the profits and losses, and everyone is participating in the business itself, we are on call. Pay attention to this. General partners. General partner is liable jointly and severally, right? With whom? With the partnership for whatever liability arises in the partnership business. For example, you go to my taqueria El Flaco. And because I put some really nice ingredients into my tacos, right? So you don't gain weight, what happens? You go back to the hotel and say, "Hey, I am sick." You actually, people think that you are drunk. No, you are in your own bathroom. And then you sue Taqueria El Flaco for $1 million because your stomach is worth $1 million, right? You call one of my colleagues and say, "Hey, let's sue Taqueria El Flaco." And then I receive a lawsuit, my partnership, because this is a general partnership. The partnership is liable for me as general partner. I'm liable for how much? Huh? $500,000. No, I am liable for the entire million myself. That's the problem with being a general partner. That's the problem of having a general partnership. In order to do that, now that you understand the risk, in order to do that, we create other types of partnerships. And that's why we have limited partnerships, where you have two different types of partners. Pay attention to this, because this is the most critical issue here. We have a general partner, the partner that actually manages the business, and then you have the limited partner. Some of you say, "Hey, I don't want to be, smelling like cilantro at the taqueria. I'm not going to be cooking nothing." Okay? You call a limited partner. If there were to be a lawsuit against the partnership, for how much money would that individual be liable? For the million or for his amount? For the amount that individual contributed to the partnership. Does that make sense? So we have how many types of partners in a partnership? Two. One is the general, the other one is... You follow me in all of this? Mm-hmm. Okay. Now, where is the magic here? On the partnership side. On the partnership side, the general partners are going to be subject, on their distribution side from the partnership, they're subject to self-employment. So, I am the general partner. Whatever I am on, I receive as, from my... What? Self-employment. How much is the self-employment? 15.3. But there is an exception in the law. And the exception is that a limited partner, distributed share of partnership income, is not subject to self-employment itself. What does that mean? That the individual that put the $500,000 in my taqueria, that person, whenever that person receives their part of income in the future, that's how probably they should be structured. Again, it's not a recipe, it's like the taco, okay? Like the taco that we prepare at Taqueria El Flaco. We have buche, right? We have lengüita, we have a steak, fajita for the fancy ones, and for the not so fancy, we have the nenepi. How many of you know what is nenepi? No one. Yeah, me neither. Me neither. I just know that if you eat that, you're probably going to be suffering. Okay? So, this is a potential structure for an IT holder. At the top of the structure, you need to have your trust, or at least you should consider that. Why? Because the trust, revocable living trust, I'm not saying anything complex, revocables and all of those fantastic things, that you see in TikTok, Instagram. Open a family foundation, you're going to save so many taxes. Man, the other day I opened my Instagram, I don't know what I'm watching. The first thing is a guy saying, open an LLC, go get some bank loans, and then, repeat. I'm like, man, that's bank fraud. And he's just proudly posting it on Instagram. He's not gonna, he's leaving all the trails for the Department of Justice, of course. So, the revocable living trust will assist your client in setting the things in order, right? If something happens, you will avoid probate. That's the main benefit of having a revocable living trust. That doesn't exempt you from getting all the other documents, your will, your guardianship, if you have, minors. What else after that? How many of you have heard about holding companies? Holding companies. How many of you have your clients have a holding company itself? No? Well, a holding company only serves the purpose of holding, like the name says, other assets. In reality, interest in other entities. So that holding is what? As you can see there, right, that holding in the middle is going to hold the interest in two different entities. One is a partnership that is going to be the operating partnership. That is the partnership in the case of La Doña, right? La Doña, the construction business, that's the operating business for her. We never mix the operating businesses with the businesses or with the investments that we create in our family offices. And you know, we put the name family office, but honestly, you can put whatever name. I have a client, he's doing pretty well in the construction side. And he's saying, you know, he has this goal in mind. Very young guy, very strong guy, you know. Every time that I go to his office, he's like, how are you, Fernando? Okay. Yeah, I did the work, don't hit me. So, I get with him, and you know, his purpose is, I want to open 250 doors in 2 years. He's purchasing 5 to 10 homes every month. He wants to achieve. How does he take the money out of his business and put it into the family office? A lot of clients, you know, ex-clients, right? I had one client that he used to take the money out of his company and say, I just purchased another apartment. With what money? Because you don't have anything. Oh, with the money of the company. Is that apartment his property or the business property?
Business.
The business property. That's not how it's done. The money needs to go up so then you can reinvest down again. And then at the lower level, at least on your asset side, you need to have your different LLCs that are gonna protect, you know, you in case of any exposure. Again, you don't need that many LLCs. And again, probably all of this is too much for a lot of you. Okay? You don't need to be doing LLCs for everything. I just hear everyone saying LLC, LLC, LLC. I mean, I know that we get some fees and we organize those LLCs, but in reality, it's not necessary. If an LLC covers you from liability, that's more than enough. If you don't have that much liability, honestly, why are we needing too many LLCs? So, in this case, of course, you know, the classical strategy of, you know, setting up an LLC for a different rental property. It could be that you don't need an LLC for each property, you just get insurance, and that's that. Does that make sense for everyone? But this is a good structure, and hopefully you at least get the revocable living trust, because that will help, especially if your client gets deported. What happens with all of the assets? La Doña gets deported one day. I mean, he's using she drives a G-Wagon, pink, because she's La Doña, you know? She is very, you know, subtle, apparently. So she goes in there, California, driving in Los Angeles, boom, pink, woo-hoo. They stop her, ooh, La Doña, come Mandilon. Mandilon doesn't answer, you know. He doesn't, you know, answer the phone if he's an unknown number, so it's like, I'm scared. Poor Mandilon, no? He gets alone, La Doña gets back to Mexico. What happens with the construction business of La Doña? What happened? Does she need to pay taxes here in the US? Yes or no?
Yes.
But how? Is she going to file 1040? No longer. Now she shifts, and now she becomes a non-resident. And the non-residents have a lot of issues. And then if the non-resident passes away, La Doña, something happens to her. You know, she's too, she cannot live with without her mandilon. She passes away, La Doña. What happened? All her assets that are located in the US that are in excess of $60,000 are going to be subject with the state tax at a rate of 40%. So, yeah, you're laughing about La Doña. But all of this is for a reason. You do your trust because you want to avoid issues. You set up the entities because in the future, if La Doña were to be deported and you have your holding like that, a disregarded entity, maybe I transform it as a C corporation, right? And then, as a C corporation, being a non-resident, once I got deported, Well, I can say, man, I got deported. I don't care. Okay? What can I do? I can avoid taxes, legally speaking, if I am a non-resident owning a C corporation. How do I do that? La doña, once she is in Mexico, she's like, man, I'm a non-resident. I own my construction business. It's an LLC. I call my tax preparer, file form 8832, elect to be treated as a C corporation, and then I sell the shares of the C corporation. A non-resident is not subject to tax on the sale of shares, right? And therefore, she prevents taxation. So there are two different scenarios that if you want to look at it that way. In one, you don't advise properly, she gets hit even with the 40% of state tax. In the other one, she can dispose once even she is deported and pays zero tax. Does that make sense for everyone? That's why it's so relevant, all of this structure. And then finally, I have like probably 1 minute. Even if you don't get deported, the best benefit that you probably have in the code now, after the One Big Beautiful Bill, is this one. How many of you have heard about Section 1202 in the code? No one. What if I can tell you that you can avoid paying taxes on $50 million? Wow, right? That sounds like Instagram advice. Because those are the only ones that promise that. So, this, I'm going to leave it for you. So you read it and you understand that. Yes, I probably put the partnership as a potential alternative for a 19 holder. But maybe you have what is called a C corporation. Depending, again, if you want to exit your business in the future. If you want to exit your business in the future, let's say I am about to retire and I have a C corporation, right? You can sell your C corporation. Holding it only 5 years, you sell the shares, and the IRS says on the first $15 million of gain, I'm not going to tax you. You like that? Or no? Probably you don't, because you don't seem excited. Hopefully you get excited today with Mexico winning. That's all for me, folks. Thank you.
Hello. Thank you, Fernando. Okay, our next presentation will start at 2 o'clock. So you get a 10-minute break, run out there, use the bathroom, and then run back in. See you in a few.